Adrian Cole gave another woman the key to Vivian Shaw's childhood home while his wife watched from table 12. Not the head table. Not beside him. Not anywhere near the stage where her family name was glowing across the silver anniversary banners of Cole Dominion. Vivian sat near the back of the ballroom, between a retired vendor and a woman who kept asking if she was part of the catering staff. Her place card did not say Mrs. Cole. It did not even say Vivian Shaw Cole. It said Vivian S. As if Adrian had not spent the first 5 years of their marriage borrowing the Shaw name to get through doors that would never have opened for him. On stage, Adrian smiled like a man who had built an empire alone. Beside him stood Mara Vance. 26. Beautiful, polished, and dressed in the same shade of ivory Vivian had worn on her wedding day. "This company needs someone who understands the future," Adrian said, turning toward Mara. "And tomorrow morning, with board approval, Shaw House will become our new creative leadership center under Mara's direction." The ballroom applauded. Then Adrian lifted a small velvet box. Vivian knew what was inside before he opened it. The brass key had belonged to her father. It had opened the front door of Shaw House for 3 generations. It had hung in Vivian's mother's hand the day she brought Vivian home as a baby. Adrian placed it in Mara's palm. "Some houses," he said, loud enough for every donor, director, and investor to hear, "need a new woman to bring them back to life." People laughed softly. Mara smiled. Vivian lowered her eyes to the napkin in her lap. Under the table, she slipped off her wedding ring. And for the first time that night, Adrian Cole had no idea what he had just unlocked. The applause around Vivian faded into the sound of forks touching porcelain and rich people pretending cruelty was refinement. She kept the ring inside her fist until the stones pressed marks into her skin. Across the ballroom, Mara turned the brass key beneath the light, admiring it like jewelry. Mara notched the room watch her. That was his favorite kind of power. 12 years ago, Adrian had stood in her father's dining room wearing a rented suit and promising he only needed one chance. Back then, Cole Dominion was not an empire. It was unpaid invoices, a failing acquisition, and one ambitious man who knew the Shaw name could make bankers return his calls. Her father had given him that chance. Vivian had given him everything after it. When Mara's name began appearing in late-night messages, Vivian told herself she would not become the kind of wife who begged to be chosen. But tonight was different. Adrian had not only chosen another woman, he had placed Vivian's dead father's key in her hand. She stood before the dessert was served. No one blocked her path. That was the strange mercy of being dismissed. Once people decided you no longer mattered, they rarely noticed which door you used to leave. In the side corridor, photographs from Cole Dominion's history lined the wall. Adrian with investors. Adrian cutting ribbons beneath headlines that called him self-made. It showed the first investor dinner at Shaw House. Adrian stood beside her father under her mother's chandelier, but the plaque beneath the photograph said only, "Cole Dominion First Investor Dinner." No Shaw House. No Edward Shaw. No Vivian. She took a picture of the plaque with her phone. Then she locked herself in the private powder room and called Elias Reed. "I wondered when you would leave the ballroom," he said. "You saw?" "I saw enough." He gave her the key. A pause followed. "Yes," Elias said. "And tomorrow he will try to make the insult legal." Vivian closed her eyes. Somewhere beyond the wall, people were applauding Adrian for the future he planned to build on her past. "Did my father know?" she asked. "He did not know the exact shape of the betrayal," Elias said. "But he understood Adrian's appetite." "What did he leave?" "Protections. Transfer restrictions. Personal asset triggers. A private letter for you. I asked you to read it 3 times. I wasn't ready. I know. But if Adrian gets board approval at 9 tomorrow morning, Shaw House could be tied to corporate operations before we can stop him. Anything inside your father's study may become harder to secure." Her father's study. The room had been locked since the accident. That was the word everyone used. Accident. Brake failure. Rain. Adrian had held Vivian at the funeral and told her not to torture herself with questions. For years, she had mistaken that for comfort. Now the memory felt like a hand placed gently over her mouth. "I'm going to the house," Vivian said. "Do not sign anything tonight." "I won't. He will call you emotional in the morning. He already has. He will call you jealous. I'm not going to argue about Mara." "Good," Elias said. "That is the room he prepared for you. Do not enter it." In the mirror, her makeup remained calm, her lips pale. She looked like a woman dressed for a celebration that had turned into a public disposal. "What room do I enter?" "The one your father built." Vivian almost smiled. She left the gala through the side entrance. Her driver opened the car door and asked, "Home, Mrs. Cole?" Vivian paused. "No," she said, "Shaw House." At the end of the old lane, Shaw House rose from the winter shadows, red brick softened by ivy, white columns chipped with age, the rose wall bare but still alive beneath the thorns. Inside, the house smelled of cedar, rain, and paper. Vivian moved without turning on every light. She knew the loose panel inside the hall clock, knew the small dull key her father had once shown her. "Never trust a lock everyone can see," he had said. The study opened with a soft scrape. Dust drifted in the lamplight. Her father's chair waited behind the desk. His fountain pen lay in its tray. Beside it sat a sealed envelope in his handwriting. "For my daughter, when love asks you to forget your name." Vivian sat slowly. The sentence hurt more than the gala. She placed her wedding ring beside the envelope, then opened the drawer Elias had described. The documents were exactly where they were supposed to be. Postnuptial protections, Shaw House transfer restrictions, voting rights clauses, personal asset recovery triggers. Adrian had signed them years ago, probably certain Vivian would never use any weapon her father placed within reach. If Adrian attempted to transfer protected Shaw property without direct consent from the Shaw heir, the transfer could trigger immediate review of holdings tied to Shaw collateral. If he publicly damaged the Shaw name while using marital authority for business gain, additional penalties applied. Her father had not left her revenge. He had left her a way back to herself. Vivian opened the unsigned divorce petition she had drafted months ago and never filed. At 1:17 the morning, sitting at her father's desk, she signed her name, Vivian Shaw, not Vivian S., not Mrs. Cole, Vivian Shaw. Then she sent Elias one message: "Prepare the filings." By sunrise, Adrian would expect a wounded wife. By 9 o'clock, he would bring the board a story about jealousy, instability, and progress. Vivian looked at the sealed letter but did not open it yet. One door at a time, she turned off the desk lamp, locked the study behind her, and carried the first folder of evidence into the dark hallway where the Shaw portraits watched her pass. At 6:42 the next morning, Adrian Cole walked into the executive conference room with a fresh shave, a charcoal suit, and the confidence of a man who believed damage could be controlled if it was scheduled early enough. The gala had ended after midnight. By sunrise, his staff had selected the press photos and sent out the official company statement. Every approved image showed Adrian beside Mara. None showed Vivian. That was not an accident. Adrian stopped at the head of the table while the senior directors gathered with coffee. On the screen behind him was a rendering of Shaw House stripped of its old gardens, its front hall turned into glass offices, its library labeled Innovation Lounge. Mara stood near the screen with a tablet in her hands. The brass key hung from a thin chain at her throat. Adrian noticed it and smiled. "Before 9, he said, "I want everyone aligned." Last night was emotional for Vivian. "I expected that. Shaw House carries memories for her, and I respect that. But this company cannot be held hostage by grief." Daniel Price, the CFO, had the transfer packet open, one finger resting on the signature page. "We still need her written consent," Daniel said. "The property language is more restrictive than I expected." Adrian's smile stayed in place. "Vivian withdrew from operational matters years ago," he said. "Her silence has been her consent in practice." "In practice is not the same as in writing." Mara glanced up. "That is why we are not calling it a transfer of ownership," Adrian said. We are calling it a strategic use designation under corporate stewardship. The legal team will clean up the wording. Daniel turned one page. The legal team flagged this last month. And I told them Vivian would cooperate. Did she? Adrian paused. Mara caught it. Then he recovered. My wife is struggling with change. I will not embarrass her by discussing private matters. But if she objects this morning, it will not be about law. It will be about Mara. No one looked at Mara directly. That helped Adrian. Shame worked best when people were too polite to name it. Mara lifted her chin. I don't want to be used as the reason for a family conflict. You are not the reason, Adrian said warmly. You are the solution. You see what Shaw House can become. Vivian only sees what it used to be. The compliment landed exactly where he intended. Mara's shoulders eased. At the far end of the table, Nora Blake, Adrian's executive assistant, placed a folder beside each seat. She had spent the last hour printing the updated board packet, including the appendix Adrian had asked her to insert after midnight. It included a scanned approval page from an old Shaw collateral agreement. The page was not a consent form. Nora knew that. Adrian knew that too. But from a distance, to directors who wanted the issue resolved, it looked close enough to become useful. Adrian tapped the first page. At 9, we present this as continuity. Not a personal dispute. Not a marital issue. A business necessity. Daniel leaned back. And if Vivian refuses? Then we protect the company from instability. The sentence sat on the table like a covered blade. Adrian continued before anyone could object. We request an emergency governance review. Temporary suspension of her voting influence on matters involving Shaw assets. We frame it compassionately. She is grieving. She is attached. She is not objective. Mara looked at him then, really looked. That sounds harsh. It sounds responsible, Adrian replied. There is a difference. His phone buzzed. A message from Elias Reed appeared on the preview screen. Notice of protective review prepared. Adrian's jaw tightened. He turned the phone face down before Mara could read more. Move the vote packet to the front, he told Nora. If Vivian brings lawyers into my boardroom, I want the directors looking at progress before they look at paperwork. Nora nodded, but her eyes dropped to the copied signature page in his folder. Adrian noticed. Nora. She looked up. You understand what is at stake. Her mother's hospital bills had been paid from a discretionary fund Adrian controlled. Her job, her insurance, her silence, all of it lived under the same roof. Yes, Mr. Cole, she said. Mara watched the exchange, but she did not yet know what she had seen. At 8:54, the directors began taking their seats. At 8:56, Daniel closed the transfer packet without signing his recommendation. At 8:57, Adrian stood at the head of the table and adjusted his cuffs. He expected Vivian to arrive wounded. He expected her to arrive late. He expected, if she arrived at all, that one mention of Mara would pull her into the ugly little room he had built for her. At 8:58, the elevator doors opened beyond the glass wall. Adrian did not turn, but Mara did. Vivian entered the conference room with Elias Reed one step behind her and a slim navy folder under her arm. She wore the same black dress from the gala, no necklace, no wedding ring. The only new thing about her was the calm precision in her face. Adrian turned at last. Vivian, he said, gentle enough for an audience. I'm glad you came. Of course, she replied. You scheduled a vote on my family's house. Several directors looked down at their packets. Mara's fingers moved to the brass key at her throat, then dropped away as if the metal had warmed. Adrian stepped toward Vivian, lowering his voice but not enough. We can still handle this privately. You announced it publicly. That was a vision statement. It was a transfer attempt. Daniel Price cleared his throat. Perhaps we should let counsel clarify the language. Adrian's eyes moved to Elias. Mr. Reed is Vivian's family attorney, not company counsel. No, Elias said. I am here because Shaw House is protected collateral tied to the Shaw Family Trust. Adrian gave the board a weary smile. This is exactly what I warned you about. Vivian is emotionally attached to the property, and now she is trying to turn a leadership initiative into a legal crisis. Vivian opened the Navy folder and removed one page. Clause 14, she said. No protected Shaw asset may be transferred, assigned, redesignated, leased, pledged, converted to corporate use, or placed under operational control of a non-Shaw party without direct written consent from the Shaw heir. Daniel's eyes sharpened. Vivian placed the page in front of him. That is me. Adrian laughed once, soft and practiced. You are still my wife. You have supported every major expansion this company has made. I supported the company, Vivian said. I did not gift you my father's house. Mara's gaze moved between Vivian and Adrian. You said the trust issue was ceremonial. It is, Adrian said quickly. A formality being exaggerated. Then show the consent form, Vivian said. Nora, standing by the side cabinet with spare packets, stopped moving. Adrian glanced at her. Daniel opened the appendix. We have an approval page attached here. Elias studied the page, then set it flat on the table. This is not consent for the Shaw House Renewal Initiative. This is a scanned signature page from a collateral acknowledgement signed 7 years ago. Adrian's smile thinned. The authorization covers related asset management. It does not, Vivian said. She turned to the board. If anyone here votes based on that page, you will be voting on a document presented outside its original purpose. A director near the window shifted in his chair. Another flipped to the signature page. Adrian's voice cooled. Be careful, Vivian. Accusing your own company of misconduct in front of the board carries consequences. Then write down my exact accusation, she said. Someone attempted to use an old Shaw signature page to imply consent for a transfer I never approved. Mara's face revealed confusion before she hid it. Adrian moved behind his chair. This is jealousy dressed as legal language. Vivian finally looked directly at Mara. No, she said. If this were only about jealousy, I would have stayed home and hated you in private. Mara blinked. Vivian returned her attention to Adrian. This is about a house you do not own, a clause you hoped no one would read, and a key you had no right to give away. The brass key against Mara's collarbone seemed suddenly too visible. Adrian leaned both hands on the table. The company cannot be paralyzed by one woman's grief. My grief is not on the agenda, Vivian said. Your transfer packet is. Daniel closed the appendix and turned to Adrian. We cannot proceed with the vote as drafted. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then we amend the agenda, he said. Emergency governance review. If Mrs. Cole's personal distress is interfering with strategic asset decisions, the board has a duty to assess whether her voting influence should be temporarily limited. There it was. The second door he had prepared. Several directors looked uncomfortable, but no one rejected it outright. Vivian felt the old fear rise. Not fear of losing Adrian. That had already happened. Fear of being turned into a story she could not correct. The unstable wife, the grieving daughter, the woman too emotional to protect what was hers. Elias touched the edge of her folder once. Vivian removed another document. Before you vote on my stability, she said, you should know I filed for divorce at 1:17 this morning. Adrian went still behind the table. And under Section 9 of the postnuptial agreement, Vivian continued, any attempt to transfer protected Shaw property during divorce proceedings triggers immediate review of personal holdings acquired through Shaw collateral. Daniel looked at the document, then at Adrian. Adrian recovered with effort. You think a divorce filing frightens me? No, Vivian said. I think the audit will. Elias slid a notice across the table. Protective review of Shaw-linked assets. Mara's hand rose slowly to the key. Vivian saw it, and her anger found a clean shape. Mara, she said, keep it for now. Adrian frowned. Vivian gathered her folder. By 5 o'clock, when your new director submits her first Shaw House budget, every signature she places on that project will attach to the legal record. Mara's confidence faltered. Vivian turned toward the door. Behind her, Adrian said, you are making a mistake. Vivian stopped only long enough to answer. No, Adrian. I am finally refusing to sign one. Adrian waited until Vivian left the conference room before he allowed his anger to show. It appeared only in his hands. His fingers pressed the back of his chair until the leather creased. His face had already been repaired. I apologize, he said. No company should have to watch a private marriage interfere with institutional progress. Daniel Price did not open the packet again. The transfer cannot proceed this morning. Then we proceed with what can. Adrian looked toward Mara. The Shaw House Renewal Initiative needs leadership. Someone who can move the project forward while council reviews the procedural noise. Procedural noise. That was what he called Vivian's refusal to be erased. Mara stood straighter, though the key at her throat now felt heavier than it had during the gala. She could feel the eyes around the table measuring her. Some curious. Some skeptical. Some quietly offended on Vivian's behalf. Adrian extended one hand toward her. I am appointing Mara Vance as acting project director, effective immediately. She will prepare a revised budget, restoration, use plan, and board-facing proposal by 5 o'clock today. Mara's grip tightened on the tablet. Today? You said you were ready. The sentence sounded like faith. It also sounded like a warning. Mara nodded. I am. Adrian smiled for the directors. Let the record show that the initiative continues under professional management, not emotional obstruction. Nora typed the language into the meeting minutes. Her fingers hesitated over the phrase emotional obstruction, then entered it exactly as spoken. Daniel raised a hand. If Miss Vance is acting director, she assumes responsibility for the operational recommendations she submits. Standard procedure, Adrian said. Mara heard that part clearly. Since Vivian had walked out, she had begun wishing she had asked more questions before accepting the key. Across the city, Vivian sat in the back seat of her car while Elias reviewed the board notice on a tablet. He appointed her, Elias said. Building slid past the car window. Of course he did, Vivian said. You expected it? I invited it. Elias studied her profile. That is a dangerous way to use someone. Vivian turned then. I am not using her. Adrian is. I am only letting the paperwork tell the truth. Her phone buzzed with a forwarded copy of the emergency minutes. Nora's name sat at the bottom as recording secretary. Vivian read the appointment language once, then sent it to Elias. She signed on to the project now, Vivian said. Acting director status gives her authority and responsibility. Elias did not argue. By noon, Mara had moved into a temporary project office 2 floors below Adrian's suite. Assistants carried renderings, budget folders, vendor lists, and architectural surveys to her desk. Adrian came in twice, each time with praise loud enough for the hallway. You are doing beautifully. This is why I chose you. Do not let anyone make you small today. Each compliment steadied her pride and sharpened her fear. At 1:30, the preservation consultant called and asked whether the East Library wall would remain untouched. Mara scanned the design notes. The library had no revenue use in Adrian's model. It occupied too much square footage and required expensive climate control. Convert it, she said. Glass conference room, keep one shelf for historical display. The consultant paused. The library is listed as a protected interior under the Shaw Covenant. Mara looked toward Adrian's closed office door. He had told her the covenant was sentimental language. Mark it for adaptive reuse, she said. At 2:15, she approved removal of the old garden wall for parking access. At 3:05, she reduced the archive preservation line by 80%. At 3:40, she authorized a vendor to begin preliminary measurements before final consent. Each decision felt small in isolation. Each one made the proposal cleaner, sharper, more modern. Each one also placed her name deeper into a record Vivian could follow. At 4:37, Nora arrived with the finalized submission cover sheet. Mr. Cole said you should sign here, Nora said. Mara took the pen, then noticed Nora's eyes drop to the key at her throat. Do you think I should not? Mara asked. Nora's mouth opened, but years of careful survival closed it again. I think, Nora said quietly, You should read every page that has your name on it. Before Mara could answer, Adrian appeared in the doorway. Nora has a gift for worrying, he said. It is why I keep her around. Nora lowered her gaze. Mara signed. At 4:52, the Shaw House budget was uploaded to the board portal. At 4:56, Vivian received the alert. She was standing inside her father's study with the original Shaw Covenant open on the desk. Vivian read the first page of Mara's proposal. Then the second. Then the line about the library. Her thumb stopped there. Her expression shifted. Not with surprise. With confirmation. She touched the protected interiors, Elias said. Vivian set the tablet down beside her father's fountain pen. No, she said. Adrian handed her a crown. She just discovered it was wired to the house. By late afternoon, Shaw House felt less like a memory than a witness. Vivian stood in her father's study with Mara's proposal open beside the original Shaw Covenant. The difference between the two documents was not style. It was intent. Mara's budget called the East Library underutilized heritage space. The Covenant called it the Protected Archive Room, containing family records, donor correspondence, and business materials predating corporate consolidation. Elias read over her shoulder. This line alone is enough to freeze the project. Not enough to end him, Vivian said. No. Then we keep looking. They worked through the house room by room. Elias handled the legal files while Vivian opened drawers she had avoided for years. Blueprints in the lower cabinet, donor ledgers behind the false bookcase, every label written in her father's careful black ink. Near the fireplace, Mrs. Whitcomb, the old housekeeper, watched Vivian sort through a stack of brittle folders. I told your father that lock was too obvious, she said. Vivian lifted her head. You knew about the study? I knew about most things in this house. Your father trusted me with dust and secrets. Elias gave her a cautious glance. Did Edward ever mention the Cole family to you? The old woman's hand tightened around the tea tray. He stopped taking Mr. Cole's calls near the end. Adrian? Vivian asked. His father, Mrs. Whitcomb said. Leonard Cole. Your father said the man could smile while measuring where to bury the knife. Vivian felt the memory of every dinner Adrian had attended here change its shape. Mrs. Whitcomb set the tray down. The week before the accident, your father told me if anything happened to him, the study was not to be cleaned. Not even dusted. He said paper has a way of moving when guilty people get nervous. Elias looked toward the hallway. Has anyone asked to enter recently? Last month, the housekeeper said. A contractor came with authorization from Cole Dominion, said he needed to inspect for renovation planning. I turned him away. Vivian lifted her eyes. Did he give a name? No. But he wore a visitor badge. I copied the number after he left. She opened a drawer and removed a folded photocopy. Elias took it. That is a corporate facilities badge, he said. Temporary access. Can you trace who requested it? With Nora's help, yes. Vivian's attention moved to a narrow file half buried beneath architectural drawings. The tab read, Vance, Cole Acquisition Dispute. For a moment, the name meant nothing, and too much at once. She opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, a settlement draft, and a handwritten note from her father. Leonard Cole pushed Vance Manufacturing into distress, then acquired through a shell buyer. Daughter survived. Records incomplete. Revisit after Dominion merger. Vivian read the note again. Daughter survived. Mada. Elias saw her face. Vivian. She doesn't know, Vivian said. We cannot assume that. She wore his key around her neck, Elias. She thinks Adrian chose her. The old lawyer said nothing. Outside, tires rolled over gravel. Mrs. Whitcomb stepped toward the window. I was not expecting anyone. Vivian closed the Vance file and moved to the side of the curtain. A black company car had stopped near the garden wall. A man in a dark jacket stepped out, spoke into his phone, and looked toward the east side of the house. Not the front door. The library. Elias reached for his phone. Do not confront him. I'm not going to. Vivian watched the man cross the wet grass toward the old French doors. He carried no toolbox, no survey case, only a flat leather folder tucked under one arm. Her father's words came back through Mrs. Whitcomb's voice. Paper moves when guilty people get nervous. Vivian lifted her phone and recorded through the curtain as the man tried the library door. The brass handle turned once. Locked. He checked the windows next. Then his phone rang. He answered, irritated. Vivian could not hear every word, but she heard one name clearly. Adrienne. The man listened, looked back at the house, and said, "The study files may still be inside." Elias was already calling security. The man retreated before anyone reached him, leaving only shoe marks in the wet garden soil. 10 minutes later, Vivian stood in the library doorway, looking at the protected shelves Mara had marked for removal. The house had not only remembered, it had warned her. She placed the Vance file, the badge copy, and her father's note into Elias's evidence case. Then, she picked up the sealed letter from her father's desk. She left the seal unbroken and carried its weight with her. At 5:18, Mara Vance learned that power could feel exactly like a trap if someone handed it to you too quickly. Her Shaw House proposal had been uploaded for less than half an hour when the first red comments appeared from Legal Review. Protected interior. Unauthorized preliminary vendor access. Covenant conflict. Consent deficiency. Each phrase looked small on the screen. Together, they made her name feel like a signature on a door she had never meant to open. She called Adrian twice. He did not answer. At 5:31, he finally texted back. "Stay calm. Let legal overreact. I'll handle Vivian. Not I'll handle the issue. Not I'll protect you. Vivian." Mara read the message 3 times, then put her phone face down. Her temporary project office felt suddenly overlit. The renderings on the walls, glass partitions, polished conference rooms, a rooftop terrace no longer looked like renewal. They looked like cover. Nora came in carrying a revised board notice. "Meeting moved," she said. 7 o'clock. "Why?" "Emergency review. Mr. Cole requested it after the legal flags." Mara took the paper. Her title was printed under the project risk section. "Acting Project Director, Mara Vance." "Risk section," she said. Nora did not answer. Mara raised her eyes. "You knew this could happen. I knew you were being asked to move fast. That is not the same thing." "No," Nora said. "It isn't." Mara pushed back from the desk and went upstairs to Adrian's suite. His assistant outside the door said he was on a call. Mara entered anyway. Adrian was not there. His laptop was open on the side table, connected to the conference screen from the morning. Mara did not mean to read. That was what she would tell herself later. But her name was on the subject line. R.E. Vance appointment containment value. Her hand moved before her pride could stop it. The email chain began with Daniel Price asking whether appointing Mara increased exposure if the Shaw Covenant dispute escalated. Adrian's answer was short. "Mara is project-facing authority. Useful pressure point if Vivian frames this emotionally. If needed, position her as ambitious but inexperienced. Keeps board focus away from marital asset fight." Mara stared until the words became only shape. Useful pressure point. Ambitious but inexperienced. This was not romance. It was insulation. Adrian had placed her in front of the fire and called it trust. Behind her, the door opened. Adrian stopped in the doorway. For 1 second, neither of them moved. Then he smiled, because that was his reflex when a lie needed furniture. "You should not be in here." Mara pointed to the screen. "Is that what I am?" He walked in and closed the door. "You are reading internal strategy without context." "Pressure point?" A legal phrase. "No, it isn't." His patience thinned. "Mara, do not let Vivian turn you against the only person in that building who sees your potential. You wrote that before Vivian said anything to me. That is because I know how these people work." "These people?" "The Shaws. They're lawyers. They're old money rituals. They make you feel chosen, then remind you that you were allowed in." Mara hated that the words still found the bruise in her. Adrian knew exactly where it was. "My family lost everything because of people like that," she said. Something small crossed Adrian's face and disappeared too quickly. Mara caught it. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. You knew that. I knew your family had difficulties." "No." Her voice lowered. "You knew the name." Adrian's phone rang before he could answer. He looked at the screen, rejected the call, and slipped the phone into his pocket. But Mara had seen the caller ID. Facilities contractor. The same division that handled Shaw House access. Across town, Vivian sat with Elias in the back office of a private archive firm. The Vance file had been scanned, copied, and placed beside the old badge record Mrs. Whitcomb had saved. Elias turned his laptop toward her. The temporary badge was requested by Coal Dominion Facilities at 3:12 yesterday. Authorized by Adrian's office. Vivian read the timestamp. Before the gala. He planned to get into the house regardless of whether you objected. Vivian rested her hand over the sealed letter from her father. She still had not opened it. The envelope had become heavier each hour. What about Vance Manufacturing? Elias pulled up the acquisition trail. Leonard Cole pushed the company into default through a shell vendor dispute, then bought its assets at a discount. Public record shows both parents died within 2 years. The daughter disappeared from the records after relocation. Mara. Yes. Vivian leaned back slowly. Mara had not walked into Adrian's life by accident. She had been selected. The scanned newspaper photo showed a younger Mara at a factory gate, her hand in her mother's, watching adults lose a world. "Do we tell her?" Elias asked. Vivian's answer did not come quickly. At 6:04, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photograph of Adrian's email. Useful pressure point. Below it was one sentence. "Did he know who my father was?" The question sat on Vivian's phone until it no longer belonged only to Mara. Then she typed back, "Yes, but not everything." At 6:07, Mara read the reply alone in Adrian's office, with the brass key cold against her skin. Down the hall, Adrian was already telling Daniel to prepare a board narrative. Vivian unstable, Mara misled, company endangered. By 7 o'clock, he planned to sacrifice whichever woman the board would accept first. Mara closed the laptop. For the first time since Vivian had entered the conference room that morning, the key did not feel like a prize. It felt like evidence. At 6:22, Adrian Cole stopped pretending the day could still be managed with charm. He closed his office door and called Daniel Price. "I want the governance review expanded," Adrian said. Daniel's voice came through cautious. "Expanded how?" "Capacity. Conflict of interest. Emotional impairment, affecting strategic judgment. That is a serious category. So is threatening the company with a divorce filing during a live asset initiative." Daniel did not answer. Adrian moved to the window, looking down at Coal Dominion's name above the entrance. That sign steadied him. "Vivian is grieving," he said. "Everyone knows that. Her father's death broke something in her." "You mean the therapy file?" "I mean documented history. That was private. It becomes relevant when she uses corporate power to punish personal pain." The words sounded clean. That was why Adrian liked them. They made cruelty wear a suit. At 6:31, selected board members received a confidential supplement. It did not include Vivian's full therapy records. Adrian was too careful for that. It included references, dates, a physician's name, phrases trimmed from context, acute grief response, difficulty accepting loss, fixation on unresolved circumstances surrounding father's death. He attached a note of concern. "I have avoided raising this out of respect for my wife. Given today's events, the board must consider whether Vivian's judgment regarding Shaw-linked assets is compromised." He signed it with regret. Mara was still in his office when the supplement arrived on her tablet. She read the first paragraph and looked up. "You sent them her therapy history?" "A limited reference. That was after her father died." "Exactly. You're using that?" "I am protecting the company." "No. You are cutting her where no one can see blood." The sentence landed too close to truth. Adrian's face hardened. "Be careful, Mara. You are in that risk section because Vivian's lawyer put you there. You put me there. I promoted you. You positioned me. He stepped toward her. I gave you a seat. Women like Vivian never would. Mara touched the key at her throat. And what do you love? His phone rang. This time, he answered. Nora. Not now. Whatever Nora said made his expression sharpen. No. The access log does not leave your desk. If anyone asks, facilities requested the badge for preliminary inspection. Nothing more. Adrian ended the call and found Mara watching him. What badge? She asked. A routine facilities issue. For Shaw House? Did you send someone there before Vivian objected? I sent people to inspect a property the company is trying to use. You sent someone to the library. His eyes narrowed. Who told you that? The answer was enough. Mara stepped back from him. Adrian changed tactics. You are overwhelmed, he said. That is what Vivian wants. Mara tapped the therapy supplement on the tablet. No, she said, that is what you do. At 6:48, Vivian received the supplement from a director who added only 2 words. I'm sorry. She read it once in the archive firm's office. Elias stood beside her. His face told her he understood from the first line. Vivian had expected attacks on her marriage, her voting power, her judgment, even her grief. But seeing the private language of her lowest months turned into corporate evidence made her hands go cold. The file mentioned the spring after her father's funeral, when she had slept on the floor outside the locked study. It mentioned the questions she had asked about the accident. It made those questions look like symptoms. Adrian had not comforted her then because he loved her. He had been learning the shape of her pain. Elias spoke carefully. We can challenge this. It is a privacy violation. Vivian placed the tablet face down. Not yet. If I answer this with outrage, he gets exactly what he wrote. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. I want the source, she said. By 7:03, Elias had confirmation from the clinic. No full release had been issued. A summary note had been requested 2 weeks earlier by a consultant retained through Adrian's office under a corporate wellness review. 2 weeks earlier. Before the gala. Before the key. Before Vivian refused anything. Adrian had prepared to call her unstable before she gave him a reason. At 7:11, Vivian sent 1 packet to Elias, Daniel Price, and 3 directors. The time-stamped clinic inquiry, the consultant's invoice, and Adrian's office authorization code. No accusation in the email body. Only a subject line. Governance review source of confidential supplement. Then she opened her father's sealed letter. Elias turned away to give her privacy. The paper had yellowed at the edges. Her father's handwriting filled only half the page. Vivian. If you are reading this, someone has asked you to prove that your pain makes you unreliable. Do not accept their frame. Grief is not weakness. It is memory refusing to be buried. Follow the signatures. Follow who benefits when a woman is called unstable. And if Adrian stands too close to the Cole story, look behind him. Vivian pressed the letter flat with both hands. At 7:18, Daniel Price read her email in the board anteroom and stopped walking. At 7:19, Nora Blake copied the access log to a drive. At 7:20, Mara removed the brass key from her neck and placed it in her purse. Adrian entered the board suite at 7:23 with a folder full of Vivian's pain and a speech about responsibility. He thought he had made her smaller. He had only shown everyone where to begin looking. Nora Blake had copied the access log before she decided whether she was brave. That was how fear worked for people who survived by obeying. Her hands did the right thing first. Her mind argued afterward. She stood in the copy room on the executive floor with a flash drive hidden inside her closed fist, listening to the printer's warm and the elevator doors open down the hall. On the drive were 3 files: the temporary facilities badge requested before the gala, the scan record for Vivian's old signature page, and a late-night instruction from Adrian's office marked routine appendix preparation. Routine. Nothing about the day had been routine except the way powerful people asked ordinary people to carry their dirt. Her phone buzzed. Mr. Cole. Board suite. Now, Nora looked at the message, until the letters blurred. Her mother's treatment center called every Thursday. Adrian's discretionary fund had covered the last 4 payments after Nora's insurance denied a medication review. He had never said the money bought silence. He did not have to. Men like Adrian made debt feel like gratitude until they needed it to feel like a leash. She put the flash drive in her jacket pocket and walked toward the board suite. Inside the anteroom, Adrian was reviewing his notes. Mara stood near the far window, no key at her throat. Daniel Price kept reading Vivian's email about the clinic inquiry, his face tighter each time he reached the authorization code. Adrian looked up when Nora entered. "I need the facilities log," he said. Nora kept her voice even. "The original? All copies." Daniel lifted his eyes. Adrian noticed and smiled without warmth. "We do not need irrelevant operational noise confusing the review." Nora felt the flash drive against her ribs. "It may not be irrelevant," Daniel said. Adrian turned to him. "A badge request does not prove anything. Then why remove it?" The question stayed there long enough for Mara to look away from the window. Adrian set his folder down. "Because Vivian's attorney is building a performance. He will throw every scrap of paper into the room and hope the board mistakes volume for truth." Nora heard herself speak before she planned it. It was not just the badge. Adrian's eyes moved to her slowly. "What did you say?" Nora's mouth went dry. For a second, she saw her mother in the clinic bed, apologizing for needing help. She saw the invoices. She saw Adrian signing the fund request with a blue pen, telling her good employees deserved loyalty. Then she saw Vivian at the conference table that morning, refusing to accuse Mara of what Adrian had wanted her to accuse. Nora reached into her pocket. "The signature page was scanned at 12:43 last night," she said. "After the gala announcement, Mr. Cole asked me to insert it into the board appendix." Adrian stepped toward her. "Nora." She flinched, but she did not stop. "He said the board only needed to see a Shaw signature attached to the asset language. He said legal could refine it later." Daniel stood. "Do you have the scan record?" Nora placed the flash drive on the table. Adrian's voice lowered. "Think very carefully about your next sentence." "I have been thinking carefully all day," Nora said. Mara turned from the window. "Why did you do it?" Nora looked at her then. Not at Adrian. Not at Daniel. At Mara, who had worn the key and signed the budget without knowing where the floor ended. "Because I was afraid," Nora said. "And because he helped my mother when no one else would. I told myself that made him generous. But generous people do not make you repay them with someone else's house." Adrian's face changed in a way most people would have missed. The anger did not rise. It narrowed. "You are making yourself unemployable." "No," Daniel said quietly. "She is making herself a witness." The door to the boardroom opened behind them. Elias Reed stood there with Vivian at his side. Vivian had heard enough. Nora looked at her, shame finally breaking through the careful professional mask she wore every day. "I should have said something this morning," Nora said. Vivian did not soften the truth. "Yes," she said. "You should have." Nora nodded as if the answer hurt but also steadied her. "Then I am saying it now." She took one more document from the folder in her arms. A printed access report, with Adrian's authorization code beside the facility's badge request. "This is the man sent to Shaw House," she said. "And this is the office that approved it." Vivian accepted the page. Adrian reached for the document. Vivian moved it out of his reach. "No," she said. "You have touched enough things that belong to my family." Behind them, the board members were taking their seats. The review Adrian had called to shrink Vivian was about to begin with his own assistant waiting to testify. The boardroom doors closed at 7:31. Adrian chose to stand. That was deliberate. A seated man could be questioned. A standing man could perform control. Vivian sat across from him with Elias on her left and Nora 2 seats behind her, hands folded around nothing now that the flash drive had been surrendered. Mara remained near the wall, not at Adrian's side, not yet anywhere else. The brass key was no longer visible. Daniel Price opened the review with a careful statement about governance risk, protected assets, and urgent board responsibility. Adrian waited until Daniel finished. Then he stepped forward. "I regret that we are here," he began. No husband wants to discuss his wife's pain in front of directors, counsel, and senior staff. But Cole Dominion is larger than one marriage. It is larger than one family's attachment to a house. Vivian did not look down. Adrian softened his voice for the older directors. "Vivian has suffered greatly since Edward Shaw's death. I have tried to shield her, but today she filed for divorce, threatened an audit, intimidated a promising young executive, and attempted to freeze a project that would benefit this company." Mara's face tightened at promising young executive. Adrian turned one palm upward. "This is not about theft. Shaw House has sat unused while the world moved on. I proposed renewal." Vivian heard replacement. A few directors shifted. "He was good at this." Adrian continued. "I asked the board to temporarily limit Vivian's influence over Shaw. Linked operational matters until independent counsel can review her capacity and conflicts." There was the public lie, polished smooth enough to look like concern. Vivian rose only after he finished. "If this were about my grief," she said, "there would be no forged implication of consent." Daniel connected the flash drive to the room system. The first file appeared on the screen, the scanned signature page from 7 years earlier, followed by the access timestamp from 12:43 that morning. Elias spoke, not loudly. This signature page belonged to a collateral acknowledgement. It was inserted into yesterday's board appendix after the gala announcement. It was not attached to any Shaw House transfer. Nora stood. Every eye moved to her. "I inserted it," she said. Her voice shook once, then steadied. "At Mr. Cole's instruction. He said the board needed to see a Shaw signature near the asset language." Adrian faced her slowly. "Nora misunderstood an administrative request." "I did not," Nora said. Daniel brought up the second file. The instruction marked routine appendix preparation, sent from Adrian's office after midnight. Adrian's expression did not break, but his hand went to his cuff. Vivian noticed. So did Mara. Elias placed the Shaw covenant on the table. Clause 14 requires direct written consent from the Shaw heir before any protected asset may be assigned, redesignated, leased, converted, or placed under operational control of a non-Shaw party. Vivian slid Mara's budget forward. "This proposal removes protection from the East Library, reduces archive preservation by 80%, and authorizes preliminary vendor measurements before consent. Those are documented violations." Mara closed her eyes briefly. Adrian seized the opening. "Exactly. Miss Vance prepared that proposal. If errors were made, they were project-level mistakes by an inexperienced director under time pressure." Mara's fingers tightened against the table edge. The sacrifice had arrived on schedule. Vivian did not rescue Mara from the truth. "Mara signed it," she said. "But she signed after you appointed her as project-facing authority, and after you told the board I was emotional obstruction." Daniel clicked to the email chain Mara had photographed. "Mara is project-facing authority. Useful pressure point if Vivian frames this emotionally." The words needed no volume. Adrian's name sat beneath them. "That email is taken out of context," Adrian said. Mara stepped away from the wall. "Then give the context," she said. Adrian turned. "Mara, this is not the moment." "No, it is exactly the moment you made for me." She placed a thin packet on the table. "When Adrian hired me, he told me I reminded him of himself. Hungry, overlooked. Not born into rooms like this." Her mouth tightened. "I believed him because I wanted it to be true." Vivian watched her without forgiveness and without interruption. Mara tapped the packet. "My father owned Vance Manufacturing. Leonard Cole forced it into default through a shell vendor dispute and bought the assets through another company. My parents lost everything. My mother died before the lawsuit could be reopened. My father followed 2 years later." Adrian's voice dropped. "You do not know what happened in your parents' business." "No," Mara said, "but your father did, and Vivian's father knew enough to keep a file." Elias opened the Vance file from Shaw House, newspaper clippings, settlement drafts, Edward Shaw's handwritten note. The document camera enlarged the line Vivian had read earlier. Leonard Cole pushed Vance Manufacturing into distress. Daughter survived. Records incomplete. Revisit after Dominion merger. Mara's eyes stayed on Adrian. Did you know who my father was when you hired me? Adrian said nothing. Silence would have sounded better if he had not spent the entire evening speaking so beautifully. Did you know? Mara asked. Adrian adjusted his cuff, though it was already straight. Vivian turned to Elias. The old attorney unfolded the letter from Edward Shaw. My client has authorized me to read one passage, he said. Vivian nodded. Elias read, follow the signatures. Follow who benefits when a woman is called unstable. And if Adrian stands too close to the Cole story, look behind him. He lowered the page. Edward Shaw requested a private review of Leonard Cole's acquisition trail 2 weeks before his death, Elias said. The review was cancelled after the accident. The cancellation request came from Cole Dominion's Legal Transition Office, signed by Adrian Cole. He lowered the file. Adrian did not cause the rain. But he made sure the questions died with Edward. The board did not erupt. It did something worse for Adrian. It began to separate from him. Daniel removed Adrian's governance packet from the active stack. A senior member asked counsel to preserve all records. Adrian saw the vote leaving his hands. This is absurd, he said. You are connecting old family grief, a failed vendor, and one administrative mistake to assassinate my leadership. Vivian stepped closer to him. No, she said. You used my grief to question my judgment. You used Mara's ambition to hide your risk. You used Nora's fear to move paper. You used my father's name until it became inconvenient. Adrian looked at her with open hatred now. It was almost honest. You were never a builder, Vivian, he said. You were a last name with a lawyer. Vivian held his stare. And you were a signature I should have audited years ago. His mouth twisted. You would have nothing without me. That was your mistake, she said. You spent 12 years believing I did not know what I had given. Daniel stood. Pending independent investigation. I move that Adrian Cole be suspended from executive authority, his voting influence over Shaw, linked assets frozen, and temporary control of all protected Shaw matters transferred to Vivian Shaw under the existing collateral agreement. A director seconded it. Adrian turned toward the board. You cannot do this. Vivian looked at the screen, where the old signature page still sat beside the timestamp that exposed him. They can, she said. You signed the agreement that lets them. The vote passed with only 2 abstentions. No applause followed. This was not a gala. It was a door closing with witnesses. Mara set the brass key on the table between Adrian and Vivian. It landed softly, but Adrian looked at it as if it had struck him. Vivian did not pick it up yet. Instead, she turned to the board. Now, she said, we begin the audit. By 9:12 that night, Adrian Cole's name still hung above the front entrance. But no one read it the same way. Security did not drag him out. Vivian had not wanted cheap humiliation. Adrian had already made the story small enough. He was escorted to his office under supervision. His laptop stayed on the desk. His access card went into a sealed evidence bag. In the hallway, employees stepped aside without speaking. Some had worshipped him that morning. Some had feared him. Some had repeated his version of Vivian because silence had felt safer. Adrian carried one leather briefcase past the history wall where Vivian's photograph still had not been restored. He stopped at the first investor dinner photo. Edward Shaw, young Adrian, the chandelier at Shaw House, and a plaque that still credited only Cole Dominion. Vivian stood 10 feet behind him. You got what you wanted, he said. No, Vivian answered. I got enough to begin. His laugh had no polish left. You think a name on paperwork makes you strong? I think signatures matter when people spend years pretending they do not. You will destroy everything I built. Vivian glanced at the sign above the entrance. I am going to find out what was built, she said, and what was stolen. That was the last private sentence she gave him. Adrian left without photographers, applause, or the woman he had placed beside him on stage. Mara Vance waited across the lobby, her coat folded over one arm and the rest of Adrian's emails in a folder. "I gave Daniel everything I have," she said. "Project messages, private instructions, notes about you." Vivian's face did not change. "I am not asking you to forgive me," Mara said. "Good. I wanted your chair. I wanted him to choose me in front of people who used to make me feel invisible. When he gave me that key, I let myself believe I had become untouchable." Vivian faced her fully. "You touched a house that was never yours. I know. You signed damage into a record. I know that too." Mara removed a small envelope from her purse. "My father's last letter to the attorney who tried to reopen the Vance case. I found it last year and did nothing because I thought reopening the past would make me look weak." Vivian accepted it but left it sealed. "Adrian knew enough to use both of us," Mara said. "Then testify to your part," Vivian replied. "Not only the part that makes you a victim." Mara nodded and left through the side exit. No embrace. No clean redemption. Only a document passed from one wounded hand to another. And the beginning of a harder truth. By midnight, temporary control of all Shaw-linked assets had been recorded. By morning, audit notices went out. The facility's contractor was identified. The clinic consultant received a preservation notice, and Leonard Cole's old acquisition files were pulled from storage. Vivian slept for 2 hours in a chair at Shaw House. At dawn, Mrs. Whitcomb found her in the study with her father's letter open beside her and tea waiting on the tray. "Did you lose your ring?" the old housekeeper asked. "No," Vivian said. "I left it with the old version of myself." 3 weeks later, the investigation became public through filings, resignations, asset freezes, and amended statements. Adrian was removed permanently as CEO pending civil and criminal inquiries. His Shaw-linked voting influence stayed frozen. Nora testified under protection and kept her job in another division after the board moved her mother's care to an independent hardship fund. Daniel remained CFO only after surrendering every file tied to Adrian's office. Mara testified as well. She lost her acting title and resigned, but her statement reopened questions around Vance Manufacturing and Leonard Cole's acquisition trail. She did not become Vivian's friend. She became something more useful to the truth. A person willing to say, under oath, that ambition had made her easy to use. Adrian issued statements about betrayal and grief until counsel made him stop. By then, one phrase had already ruined his mask. Useful pressure point. 6 months later, the board held the restructuring vote inside the East Library of Shaw House. Not a glass conference room. Not an innovation lounge. The shelves remained. The ledgers remained. Edward Shaw's desk had been polished, not replaced. The brass key lay in front of Vivian as she chaired the vote. The resolution passed unanimously. Cole Dominion would become Shaw Dominion. No champagne followed. Vivian requested none. The only ceremony was a corrected history plaque placed on the table for approval. Shaw House, First Investor Dinner, hosted by Edward Shaw and Vivian Shaw. Foundational collateral for early Dominion expansion. Vivian read it twice. A name restored on metal did not bring back her father, but it returned one stolen truth to the record. Later that afternoon, workers removed the Cole Dominion letters from the tower downtown. Employees gathered across the lobby and watched through the glass. Adrian did not attend. Vivian did not need his face to complete the moment. When the new sign rose, it did not shine louder. It simply told the truth. Shaw Dominion. That evening, Vivian returned to the executive office Adrian had occupied for 11 years. The furniture was gone. On the wall hung a framed photograph from Mrs. Whitcomb. Vivian as a child on the Shaw House steps. Her parents holding the old brass key above her open palm. On the desk sat the real key. Not a copy. Not a symbol borrowed for a speech. The same brass key Adrian had given to Mara beneath the gala lights. Vivian picked it up, remembering the laughter in the ballroom. The memory no longer cut the same way. There was a soft knock. A young facilities manager stood at the door, holding a work order. "Miss Shaw, we can change all the locks at Shaw House tomorrow if you want. After everything, it might feel safer." Vivian weighed the key in her palm, then turned to the photograph of her parents. "No," she said. The manager waited. Vivian walked to the wall beside the photograph and placed the key inside a small glass frame Elias had ordered. Beneath it was a brass label with 6 words. Shaw House. Never transferred. Never forgotten. She closed the frame. "It already opens the right door," she said.